moon's nodes aren't physical bodies, they're points in space. The point at which the moon crosses the plane of the ecliptic when moving in a northerly direction is called the ascending node or the north node. 2 weeks later, when the moon intersects with the ecliptic plane going in a southerly direction, the point of intersection is called the descending node or the south node. These are the symbols we use for the moon's nodes. This is the north node, and this is the south node. You might also hear them referred to as the dragon's head and the dragon's tail. That reference floated over from the Hindu astrological system, and the dragon terminology is still used sometimes in Western astrology. In your chart, the north and south nodes are always directly opposite each other, and therefore they're said to comprise the nodal axis. The nodes represent dual energies. They carry the opposing energies of the sun and the moon because the nodes are the point at which the paths of those two bodies cross. So each node stands for one end of the duality. The most general way to think of what the nodes represent is that the north node represents the masculine and the south represents the feminine. The north represents growth and the south represents staying where you are. The north is what you need to know, and the south is what you already know. The north node stands for the future, and the south node stands for the past. The position of the south node usually describes the circumstances of your childhood, and in a more karmic form of astrology, may be seen as going further back still, back to previous lifetimes, while the north node may stand for future lives. The goal with the nodes, as with every set of opposites, is to achieve a balance between the poles, not relying too heavily on either one. You can't leave either one behind and have a full, fulfilling life. You're supposed to take what you can from the south node and develop the themes of the north. Human beings have a difficult time with duality, primarily because we tend to judge one end of the duality as better than the other, especially if one end is forbidden by our culture or by our family. Humans also carry a lot of fear of new things. So the biggest danger when it comes to the nodes is staying in the comfort zone of the south and rejecting the growth of the north, because it's often uncomfortable to grow and we don't want to take the risks or put in the time or whatever. The complacency of the south node comes from the fact that there has been so much emphasis on the area of life represented by the sign and the house that it's in. When it comes to the south descending node, you're familiar with that energy. There's a natural affinity and a natural aptitude. It's generally a place where repeated and early experience leaves you with a proficiency or a mastery, Whereas you can feel like you're starting at the beginning again with the North Node and would really rather not go back to elementary school. The North ascending node may even be downright anxiety provoking. So it's common for a person to fall back into the habits of the South Node when confronted with the challenges of the North. As with every factor in the horoscope, the nodes have their dark sides. In Vedic astrology, the serpentine dragon was capable of blocking the light of both the sun and the moon. And that fact gives us a clue as to the dark sides of the nodes in Western astrology, too. The South Node, being associated with lunar energy, carries some of the darknesses of the moon, a clinginess and compulsive behavior that come from unexplored needs and uninvestigated ideas, propelling a person into a dark little loop. This is compounded by the fact that the South Node in the chart remains largely unconscious throughout a lifetime, much like the moon. The solar-oriented North Node has a dark side that's a lot like the sun's. The North Node can look to the native like a shining ideal. It can become a bit of a fantasy or be seen as a panacea, the thing that would make everything all right if only they had it. The North Node can also bring frustration through the gnawing knowledge that the individual should be working harder for the goals of the North Node than they are. The long and short of the nodal axis is that the goal of the North Node can only be achieved if a balance is found between the poles. Balance comes from developing self-love and self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and having faith that you can let yourself flow and there will be a creative, positive outcome. Another thing to know about the nodal axis is that the nodes move in a clockwise, or what we call a retrograde direction. The nodes take 18 years and 7 months to return to the position they were in on the day of your birth. This is called a nodal return. Nodal returns are periods in life when the North Node pressures us to make significant progress. The first time that happens is around 18 and a half. The second time, you're 37. The third time, you're 55, and so on as long as you live. If you decide to look up the position of your nodal axis, you're likely to run into an issue. Some ephemerides will show two different values for the nodes. Your nodes may be listed by both the mean node and the true node. This is done when there are a lot of perturbations. That means the item moves around a lot as it orbits. Because of this fact, some astrologers like to take a mean position, an average position. Others like to use the actual or true position. The final factor to discuss is aspects to the nodes. Planets that are conjunct the South Node or in square to it are generally found to be difficult to cope with. An individual who is able to release the past has a much easier time of it than someone who clings to the past. Releasing the past means balance between the nodes rather than contradiction. If a person can drop a linear understanding of time, a funny thing happens. The planet conjunct the south node begins to feel as if it has flipped to the other side and begins to behave as if it's conjunct the north node instead. Now, planets conjunct the north node, and planets in harmonious aspect to the nodal axis are helpful in overcoming the challenges of the south node and in achieving the actualization of the north node. In some charts, the nodes are a relatively easy ask. By that, I mean the direction the north node requires might be compatible with the rest of the chart, and the person's actualizing in that direction anyway. The people who have the most trouble with the nodal axis are those where the rest of the chart is quite different, and the north node is asking the person to go into unfamiliar territory. The nodes can also be complicated by contacts from the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So the house and sign placement of the nodal axis is one half of the picture. The condition of the nodes in respect to all the other planets is the other half of the picture. Thank you for watching Secrets from an Astrologer's Desk, Learning Astrology, Lesson 12, The Nodes of the Moon. Stay tuned for all the ways you can get in touch for a birth chart reading and complete astrological services. I'm Joy, Saturn through the zodiac to come.